Users are less trusting of ads and the offers. So they've gotten so many offers for content that's just like this lame, like ebook that doesn't
Right.
tell them anything. The way around that is to be very specific. In B2C, you just need intent. If someone wants a t-shirt or a toaster or whatever, they can buy it. If you're selling a t-shirt making machine, very few people actually have any possible use for
Mm.
that. In B2B, the text superimposed on the ad image makes up about, or the video makes up about 80% of performance of the ads. The reason why text is so important compared to B2C is, like I mentioned, one of the differences of B2B and B2C is how concrete is the product.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. I'm super excited about my guest today, Kevin Lord Berry. Kevin is the co-founder at Right%, an ROI-focused B2B advertising agency specializing in direct response campaigns. In this episode, we chat about how to create high-converting ads using some of his frameworks, why modern advertising works on power laws, and strategies for messaging across different personas and decision makers. Let's dive in. So I'm curious about the path that led you to working in B2B advertising, but I wanted to start with a bigger question. What was the moment that you realized that you could first understand and then influence decision making in B2B?
That's a fun question. I would say throughout my marketing career, as a junior marketer, you have no idea what works, right? Like you're reading books, you're following blog posts, but you don't really know what works until you've done it. And it wasn't until 5 or 6 years into my career, I got a job at a venture-backed company called On Capital and got access to real budgets for the first time, like 100,000 a month more, like as we scaled. And I saw this was 2016 or something, and they didn't have Facebook ads working before I came. And On does small business loans, so it's B2B. And it was such a thrill to be able to get those Facebook ads working, acquiring businesses, like it became a major channel for them. And that's what kind of solidified me towards B2B advertising forever, just seeing that, wow, I can make decisions, put money into a platform, design these ads, and people respond to it and actually do things that cost money. That's definitely the genesis of it for me.
Nice. What do you think makes B2B different or unique compared to B2C, especially when it comes to advertising?
A bunch of things. So number one is audience qualification, right? So in B2C, you just need intent. Someone wants to buy your product. If someone wants a t-shirt or a toaster or whatever, like they can buy it. Maybe they can buy a more expensive t-shirt or a less expensive, but like it's possible for them to be your consumer. If you're selling a t-shirt making machine, very few people actually have any possible use for that. It's pretty much just people who own t-shirt factories or whatever. And that's where the name of my agency, Right%, actually came from, finding the right percent of the population that can actually buy your product. So that's number one, qualification.
Yeah.
Number two is the abstractness versus concreteness. So if you're selling to consumers, most products are very concrete, right? Going back to you're selling a t-shirt, you can show someone in user generated content wearing that t-shirt and you can see how it works. It's a very, this is what you're buying. In B2B, it's almost always abstract, right? The product does something to your database or makes graphs on a page or something like that. Much harder to show in a second. And so like marketing around those abstractions is really important in a way that's not usual in B2C.
Yeah. I would say maybe also add the fact that in B2B you have multiple decision makers and different layers of people,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. And of course, the time for deals is much longer, is more complicated. There's a lot of
Yeah.
touches and all that.
I'm curious
Yeah.
about, you mentioned the name of your agency, Right%, and you
Yep.
say you're an ROI-focused B2B specialized advertising agency, like pure direct response, especially. What do you
Yeah.
think makes that value unique and specific? Why direct response? And it makes me think of direct response from, I don't know, the 80s when you had like paper or like email, direct mail. So
Yep.
yeah, how do you define direct response in 2024 for B2B?
Yeah. I think I'm going to answer that, but I want to say there's a broader category of marketing, of performance marketing. And what it basically means is every dollar you spend, you have some way of telling how that dollar translates into revenue for your company. And I'm a big believer that feedback loops or iteration are one of the most important things in marketing, right? You have to learn a little bit, adjust, learn a little bit, adjust. Marketing's a very organic system in that way. It's not like engineering where you know all the blueprints for the bridge, you build it and then it's done and it's all sound. Like marketing doesn't work that way. So everything that my agency does in marketing, I want to be able to measure. Now, it doesn't have to be pure direct response, although I do love direct response. And the way I think of standard direct response in digital marketing is you have an ad, someone clicks that ad, interacts with it, becomes a lead, enters your product. Some tracking information is appended to that user. Then that tracking information survives all the way to closed one or closed deal. That's what I think of as actual direct response in the modern digital world. It works on Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, and even just that basic tracking, I would say accounts for like 75% of all you need from ads. It works better than some people say.
Yeah.
That said, I don't think that's the only thing that's important. There's a lot of things that can't be tracked with direct response, right? So ungated content, lots of video or brand awareness, lots of elements of a good ABM strategy can't be tracked on a per lead basis. And in that case, like it's still performance marketing. Like I don't believe in saying, let's just run it and not worry about if it works. It comes to lift tests and conversion tests, right? Like how do you measure the impact of the stuff you can't measure directly? It's still to me like performance, even if it's not
Mhm.
direct.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking also there's a lot of advertising that's pure brand awareness advertising, right? How do you think differently
Yep.
between brand awareness and ROI focused direct response?
Yeah. The main difference is the level of tracking, right? Direct response is tracked as good as you can. Brand is only tracked in the abstract and not in the specific. There, brand advertising has a lot of pitfalls in B2B that come from targeting,
Mm.
right? It goes back to only a small percentage of the target market can actually buy your product, right? And traditional brand campaigns like Coca-Cola spends millions of dollars to do TV ads, right? They can be pretty confident that everybody who sees that ad could at least be interested in buying a Coke in the future. But if you're Salesforce doing brand campaigns, how do you ensure that 90% of the people seeing your ad aren't wasted because they can never buy Salesforce? And this is true for all B2B companies. Often a mistake smaller B2B companies make is trying to do a brand campaign like big consumer brands. And it just ends up being like a waste of money where too many of their impressions are wasted. And I don't know how much in the weeds we want to go in, but all of these digital ad sites, LinkedIn and Facebook, work on
Mm.
auctions. So a lot of times if you're trying to run brand ads with no optimization metric where the platforms learn like who's good to serve an ad to and who's bad, it's just like an impression equals an impression. Like most of those impressions will go to the cheapest users on those platforms within your audience because they're saving the impressions of the highest value users
Mm.
for campaigns willing to bid more for them. That's a little inside base, but really brand campaigns in B2B should be ran to very specific lists that work to get around that issue.
Mm.
Broad B2B brand campaigns are most often wasteful spending.
When you approach, for example, launching a new product, how would you deal with that? Would you launch both brand and direct response campaigns at the same time? Would you do one or the other first? How would you approach it?
So it depends on the company's model. So if they have an account-based model of marketing where they have a universe of potential customers that the sales team is already reaching out to, I would do both brand and direct
Mm.
response. And I would measure brand by serving half of the list brand ads and half not brand ads and see like the difference in all the metrics there.
Mm.
That's because like for ABM or enterprise focused advertising, Usually all the leads are known. There's less value in just like collecting leads and more value in increasing the chance any individual lead will convert. If it's not ABM, if it's more just a bit of a broader market, there's too many potential leads for sales teams to have them all on the list, then I would do pure direct response, most likely content promotion, incentive promotion across paid social and search.
Yeah. I saw you online, you wrote something about how modern advertising works on power laws. Can you explain
Yes.
that? That was super interesting.
So a power law says that it's like Pareto's law that says 20% of the work you do makes up 80% of performance. A power law is like something in math that basically says the same thing. Like a small percentage of the whole makes up like a large percentage of the results. And you can see this on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. If you run 20 ads inside a campaign, these platforms, when functioning correctly, don't give 5% of your spend to each of those 20 ads. You don't get neat results like that. What happens is the platforms see that 1, 2, or 3 of your ads are doing the best and serves all the spend to them. So out of 20 ads you test, only 2 actually mattered and were basically seen by your customers.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, right? The algorithms are very powerful. They do know better than us, but it means that you shouldn't spend an equal, like, you shouldn't worry too much that every ad is perfect because so many ads are just going to be wasted. You want to get your main positioning statement out, your main headline, and cast a broad net to take best advantage of the algorithms.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you approach creating different variations of those ads, knowing that only a few are going to work?
Yep. So our approach is based on the visual headline. So what we found is that in B2B, the text superimposed on the ad image makes up about, or the video, makes up about 80% of performance of the ads. The reason why text is so important compared to B2C is, like I mentioned, one of the differences of B2B and B2C is how concrete is the product. If you're selling like a toothbrush, you can just see how it works. If you're selling a software, it's almost impossible to show how it works in an image or a short video. So you need text saying, hey, salon owners, get the salon software that'll increase your revenue 30%, whatever. So when we test, we make as many visual headlines as possible, strong positioning statements outlining different parts of the product, and use those as like our testing basis.
Interesting. Yeah, you leverage more of the images rather than the actual copy description in the ad. You use the image as a guide.
Correct.
As a like pointer.
Yeah, the image and the text superimposed on the image is so important that most of the time I don't bother looking at the other text. It's fine.
Did you see any differences in different B2B niches for that, or it's pretty much all over?
Pretty much all over. So whenever we join ad accounts and make our text-heavy ads, they just almost always perform better than whatever was in the account before.
Nice. So I'm wondering, is that something that your clients know about this power law and how only a few ads? Because I'm wondering, how do you set expectations for them when you create the ads? Hey, we're going to run 30 ads. Only 2 of them are going to work.
Can't tell you how important that question is. So when we first started, we didn't. And then the performance team would be happy with the work because we get results. And then there'd be a brand manager being horrified. Like, why do we have ads that are 80% text or with no design features except for big text? Is this agency just lazy? Like they don't know, how? So nowadays it's actually a really important part of our onboarding process is explaining exactly what I just explained to you about the power laws, about the headlines. I have a whole deck about it, all that.
Nice. So you worked with pretty big companies, some companies like Masterclass and Reddit. What are, I don't know if you could say, the top 3 lessons that you learned from working with these companies?
With big companies in general?
Yeah. Companies like these one that probably have a huge budget and you can pretty much experiment whatever you want.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses to it. The pluses is the same basics that work for all B2B companies work for the big companies. And they work even better because they have more data. I would say there's 3 things big companies have that small companies don't that'll trip you up. So one, as we mentioned, is they have a strong brand team, right? And that means you have to work with them and set expectations. So like that call of here's how we work, let us know how you work, what's your brand standards is really important at the big companies. So that's number 1. Number 2 is security, right? So big companies get much more cautious about pixels, about tracking, about server to server, about all of that. So it's very important also to work with the security teams and help like a lot of times the marketing team at big companies is helpless to the security team, which makes sense, right? Because no one wants a security breach, but helping them by giving the security team links, guides. Okay, here's how this can be set up safely. Here's what other big clients do, that kind of thing. That's number two. Number three is legal. So big companies, again, much more risk averse. They don't really care about getting an extra 100,000 in profit if it gets them in legal jeopardy.
Yeah.
And what I find is legal teams are the slowest to work with on the planet. And what we came up with basically is when you work with a legal team, you ask for a spreadsheet of all of the possible terms that we can use. And we work with the in-house marketing team to make this, have the legal team pre-approve it to save us time, and then mix and match from those terms. So I call those the three no's of marketing: is brand, legal, and security that you have to work with closely.
Yeah, nice. When it comes specifically to a company to like Reddit, I'm imagining as far as their messaging, it's a bit more unique as well, right? There's probably different angles that you need to hit. What are some things they learn from working on their messaging?
I don't know if I can say the Reddit specific learnings, and I'm very grateful to I have a head of copywriting and content strategy, Colin McGuire, who manages all this for all of my clients, and he's done a great job over the last years. But I would say most clients, like the main thing is we're testing so many headlines, is figuring out kind of product channel fit. So what element of a client is responded to the most? Like often it's a particular product. In Reddit's case, they did have some major learnings. So here's what I recommend people do if you're curious about a specific client. Facebook, all ads are public on Facebook as well as on LinkedIn. Facebook ads library, LinkedIn ads library. So if you guys are curious, for instance, what makes Reddit tick, you can go on Facebook ads library and look up Reddit or Reddit for Business, which is the part we manage, and basically see, oh, that's the kind of messaging. So yeah, I'd recommend it.
Yeah. There's another framework that I really like that you use, and it's from the book Made to Stick, the success framework.
Yes.
How do you use it? And can you also walk us through how you frame it for advertising B2B?
Yep. So brainstorming ads is hard. It's even hard for professional marketers. So there's an old book called Made to Stick. I say old, it's 20 years old now, but it was a very important book when I was first learning marketing. I thought it like so fascinating. And in this book, they did real scientific studies with three groups of people. They had professional advertisers, nobodies from the street, and nobodies from the street using like the success framework. And then they actually measured results from the ads, and the nobodies using the success framework beat the other two groups, even the professional advertisers. And the framework is, and it's amazing. I haven't thought about this in years. I still haven't memorized though. Yeah. The framework is simple, unexpected, credible, concrete, emotional, and stories. Basically, when you're brainstorming ads, and that spells out success, simple, unexpected, credible. Yeah. When you're brainstorming ads, you want to consider how do you incorporate as many of these as you can into your idea. So like simple, like credible and concrete would be, oh, our product is proven to increase revenue 28%. See our study. An emotional story would be like, wow, I use product and now my company is saved. Thank you, company. Simple and unexpected. It's hard to come up with that. Something like an ad that defies expectation in some way. You can mix them in lots of ways. Like credible and emotional could be mixed, but it really does help as just a brainstorming tool.
Yeah, and these kind of elements, you mix them, match them between all the different elements of an ad, or do you have specific ones that you try to fit in and the image, for example, on the description or the call to action?
So most of the time, we're really trying to optimize a visual headline. So the vast majority of the time, we're trying to incorporate it right in that big text. And then we'll use it in other places too, but usually the big text.
When it comes to advertising, how do you think about it in terms of templates and formulas? Because in my case, for conversion copy websites, okay, you can have some formulas and approaches, but I prefer to think in terms of frameworks that you can actually, they're more fluid, right? And the research dictates what you put into the framework. So do you have templates that you typically use, or is it more of a fluid, flexible approach?
Very fluid and flexible. So I strongly believe there's a philosophy in the US military, which I'm not in or anything, but I like it, which basically gives as much power to the local platoon, like the sergeants and the officers and the units, they don't have to wait to hear from the commander on what they can
Mhm.
do. Like they can make their own decisions because they have training. And I feel strongly about that model. And it's why like the Russian army is doing so bad in Ukraine because they're such a top-down model that they have to wait to hear from Putin if they want to do anything exciting. And it's the same in marketing. So like at Right Percent, I don't have any junior marketers at all. It's all senior marketers. It's a special model. Like nobody with under 8 years of ad experience touches an ad account. There's no in between people, project managers who are unskilled, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And what that lets my team do is be very flexible. Using the framework from Right Percent and their own knowledge, they can make decisions on the fly. They can work with clients. They can move quickly. And I think that's what larger companies really like about working with us and smaller companies as well. But it's like our secret sauce.
Okay. So you have this kind of brainstorming framework with the success formula. What's your framework for writing a high converting ad in general? Or if you have several?
Um, so you start with the offer, right? So a lot of companies don't do this. A typical offer would be the offer is anything that someone gets from clicking the ad, right? So like the default offer is get a demo or sign up. And if that's your offer, there's a lot of ways to promote that. You can look at what's the company's most popular features? What's their most popular products? So we have a call at the beginning. We call it the product overview call. And our copywriter is like the most important person there to listen. We asked the company to bring in two people. One is a salesperson and the other is a product manager. So somebody actually managing the product. And they each approach the product from different points of view, right? The sales is I have a bunch of
Mm.
questions. What's the biggest pain points target leads have? Are there any magic phrases that intrigue target
Yeah.
leads? What language turns target leads off? So for instance, we have a client, Bright Wheel, which targets childcare centers. And they like their audience gets really upset if you call them daycares because they think that's like a lesser
Yeah.
company and childcare centers are good. That's the kind of thing we learn from the client. And then the product manager talks about it from the other way. What does the analytics say? How do people use the product? What are the nuts and bolts? What's the most popular sections? And all of this is stuff we put together to try to come up with good headlines to promote it. And then if there's better offers, we use those too. So if we're offering content, gated content, checklists, templates, tools, all of those can be rich sources of making headlines to promote, as well as incentives, right? So product credits, offering a gift card sometimes works, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm. You mentioned having these discovery calls, right? I'm curious, what do your clients come to you for? What's the problem that makes them get
Yeah.
in touch with you?
They want to scale or they want to improve ROI, and usually both. And they're looking for expertise from people who have done it before. That's the main thing. Usually they have ambitious goals. It's almost all venture-backed
Mm.
companies, and they want help making sure they can hit those goals.
Yeah, because I was thinking they are probably companies that already have messaging in place on their website or for other channels. So how
Yep.
does that existing messaging influence the copy that you use for your ads? Do you also do some like discovery and looking at other materials that they have and try to include some or start from scratch?
Oh, yeah. No, we definitely try to work off what the company already has and does as much as we can. One, because they have some evidence that it works, it's been working for them. And two, because it's so much easier to get approved by
Mm.
brand and legal and the CEO, like if it's stuff they already have.
Yeah.
Uh, so we try to work as much as we can from existing assets.
Yeah. So when it comes to messaging, what are your favorite ways of testing messaging? Is it just running ads and letting the algorithm do its thing, or do you have other ways?
Mm. Yeah, the Hunger Games approach is generally what I prefer. So put all the ads together. Like we try to make about 20 new ads a
Yeah.
month for like high spending clients. We upload them roughly 10 at a time and let them fight it out in the platform. Now, this only works if you have a good conversion signal training the platform, right? So that if Facebook does choose some ads or LinkedIn does choose some ads that are the best, that's going to reflect on your back end as well. It's not vanity metrics like
Mhm.
impressions or clicks or even just top level leads. Like it's actually optimizing on something
Yeah.
good. Then that approach works. And that's what I recommend.
What if you don't have that conversion signal?
Um, you should try to get it. So
Mhm.
another one of my little sayings is B2B marketers need to create life, and life is leading indicators of future
Huh.
earnings. And basically, it's something that happens within the first day of click, that tells you this person, this lead, this whatever is like likely to be revenue in the future. So a qualifying question, like how much did you spend on our product category last year or last month? How soon are you interested in moving forward? Or it could be something they do on the website. Like they sign up for Trello and for a lot of product led companies, if they don't do something in the first 24 hours, they'll never do it. So you want to keep track carefully. What actions are they taking? If you truly don't have any conversion events, like for whatever reason, then you're forced to do a very specific audience. So you don't need that feedback loop of the conversion. So like a really tested LinkedIn audience, or like you have a list of 10,000 clients that you know is good. You can just upload it and target it and not worry about the conversion event feedback loop. But most of the times you really want a good conversion event.
Yeah. I'm curious about, speaking of testing, have you helped clients to test messaging angles that they like using ads that they could use then on other marketing materials? And how would you recommend people go about it?
Yeah, there's two ways of doing that, right? There's the Hunger Games approach we talked about. But if someone really wants to do actual messaging testing, does this work? That's when I'd pull out more formal testing, like an A/B test on Facebook with the different visual identities or whatever it is that they really want to test. Make sure that we calculate statistical significance beforehand, really design a test for them that's accurate. So we do that sometimes. It's not our normal work, but we'll do it. And as a side note, the AI chat GPT is really good at designing those tests. It's like a math whiz. So I recommend using
Do
it.
you have a prompt to instruct it? Is it like create several variants of this messaging or for an ad for Facebook?
Yeah, you can talk to it in plain language and be like, we want to test whether this or this is better. We get this amount of data per month, like 10,000 visits, and we're measuring based on how many people stay on the site or get to this page or whatever. Given these constraints, how would you design that? Like, how much data do we need on each side of the test? And then it'll do a big math calculation for 2 minutes and then tell you.
Do you use the new one, the one that has the thinking? What's this called? O1 preview, the one that thinks.
I've used it sometimes, but the regular Chat GPT
Still
4.0
works.
is good enough. But the other one's probably better. But yeah.
Nice. I wanted to ask about how do you balance creativity in your ad messaging copy with data?
Yep.
Do you have an approach, or does your team have an approach for that?
Couple different ways to think about that. Generally, we're using creativity to create the options and then data to narrow it down. So we creatively come up with as many ideas as we can, then throw them in Hunger Games style, and the data tells us which ones worked. I would say in B2B ads, there is more room for creativity in the imagery than the language, right? So like visual headlines are usually best when it's very straightforward. Use this product, here's why, using the success framework. But the imagery can be funny or whatever. Like, for instance, one of my favorite ads we made was an employee onboarding guide. It was a piece of content we're promoting for Zenefits a while back. And the headline is just employee onboarding guide, but the image was a bunch of baby ducks following a mother duck as a metaphor for onboarding. And like that ad was so successful for so long, and like some other cute ads like that. But yeah.
Okay. In that example, what made you think that kind of image would work? Or is it something that you just tested along with other things, other elements?
Yeah. So my approach has been, I'll just go to a stock photo website, and nowadays I'll use the AI too sometimes. And I'll think of metaphors myself for onboarding. All right, following, onboarding, helping, all that kind of stuff. And I'll just browse until I see one. Oh, that could work. Like another onboarding one that worked was I saw someone lifting someone else up hiking. And then I was like, oh, that's a good metaphor for onboarding. And that ad also did really well.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And I guess you also have to think in terms of what works in the audience's culture, right? Or is that something you take into consideration?
And not, the culture and also the company brand guidelines. So those kind of silly images are actually pretty hard to get approved at big companies. So often it's just safer just to use their company color background. And luckily that works because text is like most of the performance anyway. But it's nice when companies let the brand guidelines flow.
Yeah. So when it comes to understanding the background, context, culture, when it comes to a new client project, you do the discovery call. You have a couple of calls, I think. What other research activities would you recommend doing?
So There's two others. So besides discovery call, talking to their stakeholders, as well as website research, I think there's two other really good sources of information. One is reviews
Mm.
online on Capterra, on G2, that kind of thing. You can use that as inspiration and also sometimes just use it in
Yeah.
ads because it tells you what people value and what they don't value and all that. The other thing is looking at competitors. So as a senior marketer, I do this a lot less than as a junior because like I have less respect for the competitors now. Like just because they're doing something doesn't mean it's working, but it's still worth taking a look at them, especially the big ones and seeing how they present themselves to the market.
Have you ever tried naming competitors in ads, and does it work? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, that can definitely work. Generally, that works if you have one company that's a 500-pound gorilla in the space that everybody
Yeah.
knows. So I had a really old client, Roger.ai, and they were acquired a long time ago. So I can talk about
Mhm.
it. And they were competing against Bill.com.
Yeah.
And our best ad was a picture of a guy pointing to his shirt. And we superimposed the text on the shirt that said, I switched from Bill.com to Roger. And he looks really happy. And then there's a thing saying why. So it can absolutely work. The competitor has to be much more famous than you, or there's no point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also, if you are a smaller company, you don't want to name competitors and reveal them to your client customers. Right?
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
exactly.
All right. I also wanted to ask, when it comes to understanding your audience, how would you speak to different business buyers, decision makers for a company? Do you create different sets of ads or what?
Yeah, it depends on the audience, but definitely an enterprise target market is going to respond differently than a small business target market. There's a couple ways, like small business owners are much more interested in moving forward now, talking to somebody like they're less interested in like the
Mm.
details. While at bigger businesses, they're more interested in informational things that they can pass on to the right person, content. Not always, but I find the more senior the person is, the less they're going to respond to get a demo, and the more they're going to respond to some very actionable, useful like piece of
Okay.
content they can have.
Yeah. Save time, save money, basically. Specifics.
Yeah.
What about speaking to different personas? So for one client, let's say you have a business buyer and a technical buyer. I don't know. Do you create like
Yep.
different ad sets for different personas?
We do, depending on the audience. Like it's more usually different verticals.
Okay.
So, like the finance vertical versus the gaming vertical versus this. There's not usually such a big distinction between the bigger companies in the categories and like the smaller or the higher titles and the lower to do true like persona based advertising. So it doesn't come up that often.
Hmm. There's one big debate that I saw you wrote about, which is ads for lead gen versus ads for demand gen.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Can you tell us?
So basically, there's some people on LinkedIn. So beef marketing is very successful, right? Like you say, oh, I really don't like this thing. That's the old way of doing
What's
things.
that?
And the new way,
Beef market?
yeah, beef marketing, beef meaning the word for
All
fight.
right.
Like I
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
beef with you, that kind
Never.
of thing. And there are people on LinkedIn who I suppose I won't name, but there's a few influencers who basically say lead gen is dead. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. Nobody wants to fill out a form and then get called. Instead, you need demand gen, which is making things ungated and letting things happen naturally. And it's a little annoying how they say something doesn't work, that we have clients
Yeah.
profitably spending with good attribution hundreds of thousands a month doing these things. That's not to say, and so to be clear to everybody reading, like the way they describe it, lead gen is like tracked, gated content, gated ads, things that you can track from start to finish. And demand gen is all this ungated stuff of blog posts and thought leadership and this, but you're not gating it. You're just sending it to an audience. The thing is, both strategies are appropriate at different times. So if you have a small audience, like an ABM audience, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the call, then the demand gen style strategies are great because you have a proven audience. You can serve them ungated stuff, unattributed stuff, and know that at least it's the right audience that's
Mm.
seeing it. And you can measure that through lift tests or how did you hear about us buttons or things like that. But if you're going after a bigger audience, then you need iteration. You need to be able to see, oh, this campaign drove this quality of leads and this campaign drove this quality of leads. The only way to do that is through traditional like attributed lead gen. So it has a very important part to play in like successful campaign mix.
Yeah. So when it comes to your clients, I guess there's a vast spectrum of this. Who does have a good understanding of their target personas and who doesn't? Do you see any patterns when they come to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll tell you one thing. There's no pattern based on company size
Ah,
as to like how good they are at
ah,
advertising. So we've come on to like monsters who are spending a lot and somehow have an okay ROI, but they're doing everything wrong. And we've worked with small companies that are like truly ace teams that just haven't grown yet, or they don't have product market fit. So that's like a dirty secret.
yeah.
If you don't have product market fit, like if people don't want your product, then ads aren't going to work and nothing's going to work. And if you do have it, you can even run bad ads and still have your company work or not run ads at all. So what was the original question there?
Yeah, yeah. Like, why do you think some companies don't really know their recipes? Some do, and when they come to you, what
Yeah.
was the split? Maybe.
Yeah. I would say most companies that come to us know their target market pretty well. So like we prefer to work with companies that already have product market fit for the reasons that we've talked
Mm,
about. So they've already found who wants to buy and we can just laser in on that. Now, I will say almost all companies want to move up market at some point. So if they're currently acquiring smaller businesses, they want to figure out how to get bigger businesses and expand their TAM. So that's really common. But I feel like most of our clients know who they want to
yeah.
reach when we talk to them.
What about their positioning and messaging strategy? When they come to you, do they have those pretty crystallized, or does your work inform them as well?
Generally, there's like a brand guideline stock, but they haven't thought about that much. Like, how do you translate that to something that actually gets
Uh,
customers in the door that stops them on social networks? And in that, like most companies adapt our methodology on visual headlines as they see it work. So we blend their brand's messaging structure with our
yeah.
approach.
What are some trends that you see in advertising for B2B in 2024?
A couple. So one, users are less trusting of ads and the offers. So they've gotten so many offers for content that's just like this lame like ebook that doesn't
Right.
tell them anything, or a webinar that's bad, or a demo for a product that keeps calling them or stuff like that. The way around that is to be very specific. Going back to the success framework, like concrete and credible. If you're going to offer content, for instance, instead of offering an abstract white paper, make it specific by pulling out like the checklist for doing
Uh,
this and have a screenshot of that checklist in the ad, the template for doing this, and show how that template works. Give people evidence that they're going to get something useful that they can actually make use of and not just like download and never look at again.
yeah.
So that's number one, is like trust issues. Number two, I would say, is people really want to stay on the platforms. I guess this is also part of trust issues, right? Like people are hesitant to click off, go to a website, read a whole article. Like they're busy, they're arguing politics or whatever on Facebook, but looking at influencers on LinkedIn. And so like things that stay on the platform, like native lead ads, where they click the ad and the lead form just pops up, they can fill it out and go about their day, are getting more and more successful. And the platforms are really evolving ways to use those native lead ads better. That's a big trend. Tracking as well. Like everyone needs server to server tracking now. You need to set up a conversion API. It used to be optional. It's not
Mm,
anymore. I would say those are the big trends.
nice. Um, I wanted to ask a different question, but that probably influenced your work, I think. We've talked about briefly about personality typing and how you use it for your team, right? For make
Yeah.
find efficiency maybe in your team. How would you recommend SaaS B2B SaaS leaders approach it, and if they can use it, how?
For those of you listening, there's many ways which humans have tried to catalog personality, right? So the original is like Myers-Briggs, which you've probably heard of. Nowadays, scientists use like one called Big Five or Ocean when they're doing reporting. There's a whole bunch of others. There's like Enneagram and stuff. I would say it's very hard to use this in like a scalable way at a company, um, because figuring out like the elements of personality takes like introspection and takes time, and it can't be done adversarially, right? Like you can't, if your employees don't
Mm,
want
you can
to
force
be
them.
judged based on, like they only want certain personality types, like you're not going to get anything accurate because this is all qualitative questions. I find it very useful myself because I'm really into it. And I ask like all of my employees, I have 4 questions, which basically put people on the spectrum of Myers-Briggs. There's 4 letters in Myers-Briggs, like INFJ. And there's only 2 possibilities. There's I or E, there's S or N, there's T or F, and then there's J or P. And I'd use that to like get us all on the same page of across these 4 metrics. How do you and I differ? How are we similar? And that I find very helpful because it's like it's like in the movie Predator, how he switches his vision.
Yeah.
Oh, there's heat vision, there's cold vision, there's whatever. It lets me see people through a different lens. And I have found it very useful when managing my team as well as clients.
Do you also use it for hiring team members?
I ask everybody, I type everybody who I talk to as a potential for hiring or contracting. And I do find it useful to figure out where their strengths and weaknesses, because personality testing is not a measure of ability, it's a measure of preference. But that's still very important.
I've always wondered, because I'm also a geek for that, but I've always wondered, do you think personality types change over time?
In theory, the answer would be no based on twin studies. So there's been twin studies done with Myers-Briggs where 2 twins who are identical were raised in totally different households. They're both put up for adoption. They're both adopted by different people. And they are very statistically likely to have the same personality as measured by the test at age 30. It's not 100%, but it's about the same as like when they measure intelligence in that way or like other things. Like it's quite heritable. So I think we all do have a structure we're born with. That said, we all make our choices, and this is not like super scientific, like the truth. But I definitely am more on the nature side of that. Like our personalities. Also, if you see somebody, like if you work with kids a lot, you'll see like you can have 5 2-year-olds and they're so different already. And so I do think nurture is a big part of it. Nature's a big part of it.
Awesome. Where do you go to learn, Kevin? What are your favorite resources, places online or offline?
Yeah. There's a lot of good books out there. My favorite book is an old one called Being Direct, like Making Advertising Pay. It's by Lester Wunderman, who was one of the leaders of that direct marketing field, like you mentioned, like the flyers and like pamphlets from like the 60s. He was one of the guys who made that one of my favorites. I really the Exit 5 community right now, which is, I think that's where I'm at, is really good. The Pavilion community is good too. And I feel like just by being on Exit 5 and Pavilion and like LinkedIn, lots of resources will float up that are interesting that I also find.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. So where can people find you? LinkedIn, rightpercent.com is your agency's website. Anywhere else?
Yeah, I would say that's the best place to start, rightpercent.com for the agency side. And you can look up Kevin Lord Barry on LinkedIn to find me there. Lord is my real middle name. That's my mom's maiden name.
It's not like a fancy name you give up.
It's not an actual Lord. It's just a name, but help with my branding.
Also, Kevin, thank you so much. It's been great and super helpful.
Yeah, same. It's a pleasure to be on.
Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.